Welcome back to the Roundtable. I'm AwestruckVox, and Inside Out 2 is about to make $1 billion in basically 2 weeks. Something that I can really only view as a double-edged sword for both Pixar and animation as a whole. Shortly before the release of Inside Out 2, you had Pete Docter basically be a mouthpiece for capitalism as a whole, stating that the studio should shy away from autobiographical tales and instead focus on sequels. More or less stating that films such as Turning Red and Luca aren't relatable, which obviously fans of these films will disagree with, but overall the interview left a bad taste in everyone's mouths, throwing films that didn't receive proper theatrical releases under the bus in order to justify their never-ending sequel and spin-off agenda, even though Lightyear, the Toy Story spin-off that was supposed to be Pixar's big return to theaters, vastly underperformed and left viewers underwhelmed. A lot of people do not like this movie, but now they get to pat themselves on the back and roll with the narrative that sequels and spin-offs are the only way to go, as in just 2 weeks, Inside Out 2 has become the highest grossing film of the year, and is about to cross $800 million worldwide, meaning within a month or two, it is very likely that this sequel will gross $1 billion, the first film this year to do so. In fact, it scored $100 million in its second weekend, only seeing a 35% drop in ticket sales, which according to Variety, resulted in the 7th biggest sophomore outing in history and the best ever sophomore weekend for an animated film. Notably, Inside Out 2 added more in its second weekend than its predecessor, 2015's Inside Out, which earned $90 million in its opening weekend. And that's when theaters were in much better shape. The only movies with bigger second weekends were billion-dollar behemoths, Star Wars The Force Awakens, Avengers Endgame, Infinity War, Black Panther, Jurassic World, and The Avengers. So far, Disney and Pixar's family-friendly sequel has grossed $355 million in North America and $724 million globally. After 8 days in theaters, Inside Out 2 surpassed Dune Part 2, which generated $282 million domestically and $700 million worldwide, as the biggest movie of the year. Suffice to say, Pixar might actually be trapped in sequel hell for the foreseeable future. Of course, we have Elio coming out next year, which was initially supposed to come out this year. But if that underperforms, I think it might be years before we see another original Pixar film. And this left me thinking, if sequels and spin-offs are going to dominate for the foreseeable future, then I can only hope that it's sequels we actually want to see. Installments in these franchises that make sense and could build upon the previous movie in a meaningful way. Inside Out 2 works because Riley aged, she got older, her brain is continuing to develop, so in a sense, the sequel practically wrote itself, introducing the new emotions that one would discover during puberty, while also exploring all of the new additions to her mindscape. Things like core memories in the islands didn't really play a big part, but they didn't need to, and the film was all the better for it, because at no point did it feel like a rehash of the first one. And in another 9 years, if we got another sequel, it would feel warranted, as Riley would be entering adulthood, and thus her mind would continue to develop, introduce new emotions. And just like the sarcasms in this film, I can see the environment of her mindscape continuing to have radical changes as she continues to take on more responsibilities and has to make more difficult decisions in her life. There's more adventures to be had in this franchise, and I think they can get at least 1 or 2 more movies out of it. The brain does not finish development until you're 25, so I truly would not be surprised if we made it all the way to Inside Out 4, showing Riley in the workplace, and we get to see the inside of her co-workers' heads, as something as simple as awkward water cooler talk becomes a huge life or death situation to the emotions. You get it. It's easy to see that there's a lot more to say with this franchise, unlike something like Toy Story, which really should be laid to rest or have a soft reboot where we could explore a different cast of toys. But honestly, I don't even want that. While I enjoyed Toy Story 4 when it came out, I think with time I realized that the message of this film didn't have to be in a Toy Story movie. I feel like the filmmakers at Pixar have a lot to say, but they have to say it through characters that have already raked in millions, if not billions of dollars, rather than sculpting a new world and new characters that suit the message of the film.
What's next for these toys? They've been given to Bonnie. Feels like the story's over. I thought it was over.
I wish a Toy Story film would explore how kids are kind of disinterested in toys nowadays. But beyond that, we need to let these characters rest. With all of this in mind, what sequels do I think people actually want to see from Pixar? Not just the movies people are going to go see, because let's face it, Toy Story 5 is going to make a bag off of its name alone. But that feels more like, oh, a new Toy Story just dropped, it's hot outside, but I don't want to stay in my apartment all day. Let's take a trip to AMC and watch the newest Pixar film in a nice air-conditioned theater. I want to see them announce a sequel that actually gets people excited. The same way Incredibles 2 did, and then the movie came out and it's really divisive. I don't know, I think it's fine. But that was a sequel that was long overdue, in a franchise that feels like it's built for a ton of adventures. That being said, it's time to bring on Incredibles 3. Regardless of how 2 turned out, I think people will always be down for more Incredibles, so long as Brad Bird is still involved. However, I would want a third film to progress these characters in a meaningful way. Have them actually age up with the audience, instead of keeping them all at the exact same ages they were in the original. I think part of why The Incredibles 2 was so disappointing to people was that a lot of viewers waited 14 years to see what happens next, only to get a pretty predictable storyline that took place the very next day. And sure, people were begging for the sequel to open up where the first film left off. So between that and recognizable designs, I see why they felt the need to set it relatively close to the first film. But come on, it was 14 years, man! Have them defeat the Underminer, then give us a year or two time skip. But hey, even though they didn't do it in 2018, it doesn't mean it's too late for them now. If they dropped a teaser for the third Incredibles and the family looked visibly older, the hype would immediately be off the charts. And I think this franchise is capable of more compelling stories, but you do need to age up these characters in order to deliver the best version of these stories. For example, a big part of the first film was Bob still struggling to adapt to just being a 9-to-5 citizen. He could not let go of the superhero life. So what if Incredibles 3 takes place a few years later, Bob and Helen are getting older, and they know they're not too far off from retirement. Actual retirement. And now Bob is putting all of this pressure on Dash and Violet to be the best heroes they can be, simply because he's afraid of what the world will look like when Mr. Incredible is truly out of the picture. What if Dash and Violet are in high school, experiencing young love, dating people who don't have superpowers, and we get the incredible spin on the risk that accompany dating somebody who doesn't know your secret identity. Although honestly, I think it'd be a bit more interesting if Violet had this storyline than Dash. I feel like a Dash version of that storyline would be him dating someone only to find out that they're also a soup, and hijinks would ensue from there. Also, how do Jack's powers progress as he grows older? Bro can't be a baby forever, Pixar. Let him age. Let them all age. Now this might be a hot take, but another film that I think is ripe for a sequel about now is Ratatouille. It's been some time since Remy, Linguini, and Colette opened up their restaurant, but much like a lot of restaurants in real life, the Ratatouille is facing some trials and tribulations and are fighting to stay open. And there's a few ways the story can go. Maybe a sketchy businessman gets involved with the restaurant wanting to buy it, which could open its own can of worms. Maybe we just have Linguini doing his best to keep the restaurant open, but really, it might just be time for him to let go and explore his other passions. If he even has any. Maybe the restaurant itself is fine, and the movie is just about Linguini losing his passion for cooking. He's living his dream, but he's starting to realize that might not be the only dream he had, and now he has to make a major decision. I totally understand if Ratatouille is a film most people want left alone, but between the rise of food influencers and shows like The Bear, you can't convince me Disney and Pixar aren't looking at all of that and thinking, oh, word? While I don't want another Ralph Breaks the Internet on our hands, it's undeniable that the rise of food influencers has changed the game. And I do believe that could both justify and influence a Ratatouille sequel. I'm not saying I want Keith Lee to play a pivotal role or anything, but you can explore the concept of food influencers in a meaningful way without trying to make it super trendy and setting it up to age poorly. Think of a movie like The Menu, except with way less murder. Pixar only gets one of those bad boys per movie. Next up, an actual Monsters Inc. sequel. Not a prequel, not a Disney Plus show that actually really slaps. a sequel set after the first movie. Honestly, I don't have a good reason why I want this. I just want to see how Sully adapts to becoming the new CEO of Monsters, Inc. Shit, if you want to get dark, the company's crisis in the first movie was centered around how kids aren't as easily scared anymore, and the solution was to make them laugh. But what if kids aren't laughing as much anymore? Or at least, the monsters have more competition with the advent of TikTok brain rot. Mike Stand-Up is bombing now! All these kids want is skibbity toilet! This is a sequel that feels inevitable. Again, we have Monsters at Work, we had a prequel, clearly they know that this franchise is profitable. It honestly just feels like a matter of when. Finding Nemo. A third Finding Nemo movie might not really be necessary, but I think they have the chance to do something pretty special. Make Nemo a dad and put him in Marlin's shoes. I'm not saying I want a rinse and repeat of the first film, but this time Nemo's kids get kidnapped. If anything, you could have it so this time Marlin's the one finally in danger and needs to be rescued. So Nemo and his kids go on a mission to save him, and we get to see Nemo as the stressed out overprotective parent who's at odds with his adventurous and very impulsive children, who are not only eager to save their grandpa, but are very excited to traverse the deep sea. I don't know, I made that up off the top of my head, but I think there could be something there. Finding Nemo was one of the first films I remember actually seeing in theaters, so I think I'm just biased at the idea of a third film that would bring it all full circle. Last but not least, and this might actually sound kinda crazy coming from me, but I would love to see a sequel or spin-off to Onward. It feels unlikely to happen given the timing of its release, likely being viewed as a box office failure despite the circumstances. But I don't want to see Pixar relegate themselves to making sequels to films that came out before 2016. And Onward has a world that feels like it was created for numerous stories that branch out beyond the perspective of Ian and Barley. Plus, the fantasy craze hasn't really died out, so I would love to see Pixar take at least one more stab at it. And although its underperformance in the box office is probably why we won't see a sequel anytime soon, that's the exact reason I think we should get one, as nonsensical as that may be. It didn't get the proper chance to thrive, but a sequel might. Alas, it's probably too risky for Disney and Pixar. But as always, these are just my thoughts, and I would love to hear yours. What Pixar movies do you think are worthy of a sequel? And what are movies you don't want to see sequels of? Like, I assume for most people, movies like WALL-E, Up, and Coco are probably off limits, and I couldn't see something like Soul getting a sequel because I really couldn't handle seeing a black guy turn to a booger again. Plus, it was a movie that felt pretty self-contained. But yeah, drop your thoughts in the comments down below, and keep the conversation going over on Twitter and Instagram at AwestruckVox and at Roundtable Vids. If you enjoyed this video, please sure to like and subscribe to the Roundtable for more great cartoon content. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have an awesome day. See ya!